Cool. All right. So that brings us to our final session of the first half. I've got a lot of my own face in front of me, and I'm sure you're all quite bored of seeing me and listening to me drone on and on. So hopefully there'll be less of me this afternoon. I've got a really, really good insight coming up next. As I said to Kieran in his last question, this is about the digital trends of the esports industry, how it's going to look over the next few years. People who have been leading the way really in terms of research, in terms of study, in terms of academic insight into the esports industry. I'm delighted to bring onto the stage Professor Andy Meir and Dr. Maria Stukov, who will be taking over from me now and giving you a short presentation on that.
Thanks, Elliot.
Hello, everyone. Well, this is a very hard role to follow from Kieran and all the speakers, because I think both Andy and I culminate everything that's been said and will echo that back. And what was really fantastic to see is how everyone actually is concentrating on the students, the individual, the community. And even though our I guess little conversation today is looking at digital trends, what's coming up for esports, and a little bit of look in the future. I thought it would be great to, I guess, poke Andy a bit to see. He's been on lots of travels, does a lot of research into esports as well. And I just wanted to ask you, in your recent travels, what is propelling esports sort of into mainstream in terms of tech and some of the developments technology sort of unfolds, and why do you think we should take notice of that?
Thanks for the question, Maria. It's great to be here for another summit. And I was reflecting on what's happened over the last 12 months. And of course, a lot has happened because of COVID, but I think there's been so much innovation and expansion of the esports world over this 12 months. It's really, I think, been another sort of pioneering year. And I suppose I sort of look back on the last decade of sort of being involved with esports and think about how much has changed. And one of the things that's really key for me is just how many different aspects of education are finding their way into esports, but also how other sectors are finding their way into it as well. So I've spent sort of 20 years working with the Olympic movement, going to the games every 2 years to understand how technology is central to the elite sports industries. And one of the things you take away from that is that lots of those innovation companies, the organizations who many of our students want to work with, whether they finish in college, school, or university, are looking towards these global leaders that we see around the elite sports industries. And one thing that's really characteristic of those companies is that they're at the heart of esports. So you see major technology providers, especially partly because the entire infrastructure of esports is built on that technological infrastructure. But there's a real synergy, I think, that's emerged, especially over the last 12 months, and maybe evidenced by things like the Olympic virtual series, which was an interesting, if not controversial, example of the sort of fusion of sports and esports last summer, just before the Olympic Games took place. But the thing I would focus on is, again, those technology companies that underpin that development. So I think we're beginning to see much more expansion of the range of skills that support esports, and how certainly at our university at Salford, we have staff, students from arts, business, health, and science all trying to find their way into it. And that's because, as Tom mentioned earlier, there's so much within esports that relies on game design, storytelling, and artificial intelligence. There's so many things. I think that's the tipping point for esports history, is just it becoming a kind of all-encompassing educational agenda.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're both very much on that focus on seeing how some of the bigger tech companies are shaping their media platforms, and how it's actually informing culture, different broadcasting events. And, one of the things I've been particularly involved with was a host at Media City UK, and being part of the UK's first Unity Centre of Excellence based at Media City is really this, well, we say new, but it really isn't new, but I'm going to use it, so persevere with it, that sort of new immersive gaming market. It's not new. new. We've had, you know, VR sets and you know, sort of 3D virtual experience for many, many years. But it seems like, again, that esports is really pushing the boundaries of how we consume media, and how also some of these platforms, the gaming platform, is really changing also our behavior, our culture. And I think Kieran also pointed to the digital natives, the generations that are coming through behind us, very much based on how you game, how you connect, how you build these communities. And these immersive markets, for me, especially when you look at VR and AR, is a fantastic report from Ericsson about how it's changing our behaviors. And I'm just wondering also about how do we change or bring those new behaviors into education? So even though we are looking at digital trends, I think those digital trends, I'd like to, you know, for me, look at how do we actually transpose that into how we educate? This idea of sitting in a classroom on your chair at your desk. There was no, you know, there was a good reason why I was a truant at school. That didn't really suit me. But how do we bring these tech that is about community, about team building, about doing so many things, as you brought up before, XR, animation, you know, streaming tech, making sure you're secure through cybersecurity skills and so forth, into the classroom, that everyone works together.
Yeah, and I think that's really about understanding particularly how young people move through their lives. You know, whether it's starting off with, I mean, my son's now 11 years old. His first, I guess, formal gaming experience was the Mathletics game at school as a 5-year-old. So from a very early age, we moved them into these environments. And I think what's really exciting and particularly compelling about esports is the way it's sort of responding to not just sort of anxieties, but actually an awareness that the ways in which we're invested into digital technologies has a very big impact on how we think, how we behave, how we relate to other people. So I often sort of think about esports as being the sort of potential solution to the troublesome behaviors that people may have as they go through sort of gaming culture. And I think that's where we hear sort of a lot of talk about the organized community side of esports as being a really positive context in which people can experience those both those sort of concerns that they go through, but also work with them as well. So a lot of people in the world of esports now are very mindful of these challenges that young people face, and using esports as a way into healthy behaviors, a way of trying to encourage you know, balanced lifestyles. And that's why you see, I remember it was probably 6 years ago, the BBC's first sort of major documentary on esports, which sort of followed a number of players around the world, elite players, and it got across this message that, in fact, being a good gamer means being a healthy gamer. So you have a wider sort of healthier lifestyle. And interesting, I think this is filtering into the community. So we have in Salford a new leisure centre that's designing at the moment, and they want to bring in an esports facility. So I think people now understand that, in fact, esports is a route into really healthy gaming, and that's expanding beyond education. Even the healthcare sector is very much looking towards gaming activities that can promote these sorts of lifestyles.
Yeah, look, it's really interesting that with the development also of 5G, is really looking and supporting some of that in some of the research based out of a report also done by Ericsson at this, in what I'm citing right now, is that on average, young people are playing games and accessing cloud gaming 2 hours more than 4G users, which is fascinating, but also an hour more on different sort of VR and augmented reality apps. And what I find really exciting about this, and I think also James picked up on this very early on, is that co-production. Students come in with incredible amount of skill and passion and insight. What you just mentioned as well, Andy, you have you have an experience. So why wouldn't students be part of that language and the experience to shape education, test things out a little bit? You know, my role at Salford University, additionally with you looking after esports, it's also run the makerspace, and everything is about try it, fail, test it, do it again. And I think esports provides us with these great skill sets of learning and figuring things out for yourself and participating. So that co-production, especially in setting up these technologies. So I always found in a previous life, having worked for Sony PlayStation, I worked with a group of primary teachers who never really played games and wanted to look at how they can, you know, build a better retention hours of students staying in class. And we worked with them to look at Sackboy, how you set up these environments and actually do this gaming, and the retention rate went up. Students participated, they set their own class agenda. So this is not any different really of how you work with young people who know and how they want to use something and bring that into education. So, and you know, VR is, you know, especially, it's still quite expensive, I would say. You know, for me, it's a trend that I'm very curious of exploring, you know, for the future, when you look at future trends, because I am a terrible gamer. I've played for many years, but I just play. I usually go on the outsides and explore the world. I'm an explorer, probably more than a gamer. But what's fantastic about VR for me was that my scores, my hits, my driving improved tenfold. So this idea of your experience and being in a space really, really excited me much more, because I was now not in the bottom 30, I was at the top 10 perhaps, because I had more realistic experience. And I think the skills that are coming with these is very noted in music, XR, live graphics, and again, how these new platforms inform how we educate, I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think one of the really key things for me, because I get very sort of concerned about people feeling that maybe esports isn't for certain people. And I think it's, I mean, I'm not a big cricket fan, so I wouldn't say I'd be switched on to cricket terribly and wouldn't invest a lot of my time into it, because I'm not into cricket. And I don't think esports is analogous to a specific sport. I think it's more analogous to the discovery or creation of the television or the internet. It's more encompassing than that, and it is, I think, important because it's also the case that esports is expanding. You know, we've seen a lot of work, especially with British esports over the last couple of years, with Minecraft and competitive tournaments with Minecraft, and I think those sorts of examples remind us that that world is still expanding, and lots of people are very keen to ensure that people can find their place in esports by either looking at the kinds of gaming habits that people have already and responding to those, finding the communities of players that are out there. And it's also true to say that a lot of that is hidden. I mean, it was really interesting, just before the Olympic Games last year, there was a big International Olympic Committee summit, and they were discussing esports and the future relationship with the Olympic movement. And a number of the members of the committee who were also competing athletes, but they were the ones saying, we're big gamers. You know, the idea that athletes are somehow not playing computer games, quite the contrary. These are intertwined worlds. And I think that the more we do to sort of allow people to express their way into esports, the more we can do to address things like inclusivity and diversity. And it's partly what motivates me to be in that world, because I think there is so much more and so much further we have to go to bring people into esports from a whole variety of perspectives in education.
I think actually, just on that, I believe it may have been actually, Elliot, I'm not too sure, in a different conversation that actually looked at young people's skill sets, you know, using this tech, their response, their understanding to co-op, to work together, understand, I guess, some of the tasks ahead and hunts and so forth, were actually all the skill sets that the ambulance service were looking for. And actually this idea that the skill sets inherent in a player actually transfers extremely well into such a variety of sectors that actually I think I'm giving up on explaining when we have this blanketed term, you know, esports, but it is that digital part, that digital, you know, Kieran folk, you know, that digital native understanding, but how do we foster it? And I do feel like some of these generations are so much more understanding of what this means that sometimes our educators just don't get that support to also skill up. So I think that co-production is very important in exploring tech, and how do we change the education system to really reflect how tech and digital is inherent in everything, even within English, how you use writing across different platforms, the different styles, you know, more visual, perhaps more literal. So it is, I think, in an importance when you also talk about should mobile phones be in classrooms. I'm a huge advocate for it, because if you use them as part of the learning experience, that knowledge of how you connect, have different teams where you can set up, I think is really important. But we often find there's still that schism. So in terms of what you've seen recently, I mean, is there any tech you would like to see used perhaps much more in education or the learning of it?
I mean, I think certainly one of the sort of reasons to invest into esports, whether you're at school, college, or university, is that you bring students into a world of innovation through a really creative and compelling route. I mean, if we look at many aspects of esports, so for example, you will remember many years ago, the greatest test of artificial intelligence was IBM's Deep Blue versus Garry Kasparov. That was 1997. And of course, the machine won in the end. Well, the latest iteration of that was 2 years ago, where the world's best StarCraft 2 player was playing against the computer. So we see through this example how innovation within esports, game design, storytelling, AI, all these things help people see the innovation around those environments. So whether it's staging of events, whether it's the production of games, you have all these opportunities to tell stories about innovation and skills. Another good example is that there's a lots of work to try to create sort of virtual reality esports spectator experiences, and to give people a glimpse of the future of our sort of televisual experiences as being these immersive worlds in which you can inhabit the field of play as it's taking place, is to give young people a glimpse into that future and inspire them to then bring it to fruition. Actually, I think that's one of the really exciting things. By revealing that world of esports and the innovation around it is a way of showing people the future.
Actually, some of that you can see. I mean, if you jump into more tertiary or university degree level, is there are more esports courses emerging. But what I found really interesting, when you look across some of the skill set that advocate, there is a new one also just looking at streaming technologies, which I think is really interesting, how you can really sector out the technology used and actually create individuals that can be for esports, but will, if you look at the sort of BBCs, ITVs, in more, going from a more traditional, quite maybe linear media company, broadcast company, then what these new streaming platforms, and again, we say new, they're not really that new anymore, but the streaming platforms doing very well, is how do you, especially then looking at the new tech like the 5G coming in, how you do live switching, how do you overlay layers? All of these components are not really inherent in the traditional media. So for me, again, if we look at, future trends, it's not so much about trends. I think the trends are already there. Would you agree? And we just haven't yet found maybe best practices, maybe there are several practices. How do you think we can locate a good practice for it? Or do you think it's really by trial and error a bit?
I think that if you're starting from the sort of educational sector, if you are a teacher or if you are a lecturer, then actually really sort of looking around your community and seeing where people may be interested in esports is a really good place to start, because I think esports isn't best developed by one department or one subject in a college or a university. It's best developed by a range of subjects and a range of people. And I think if you haven't sort of done that work, you'd be surprised at how many people have, so as we've heard even from people like Kieran and Elliot, people have gamer histories. They got value out of it growing up and are keen to sort of share that. So I think when you go through that process, you realize that in fact there's a much wider range of people that would support this sort of work and be keen to innovate within it. And hopefully, as we do in universities, certainly try to step outside of our subject disciplines and bring people together collaboratively. And that is such an important part of the work we do. And esports is allowing that to happen. And I think that's where a lot of the developments are made and gains are made as well, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the time, we're bang on time, but what I like to say is, I mean, everything you said and, bringing also some of the examples James brought in is, and what also the BTEC does so well is really provide that 101, that real ecosystem of skill sets around. And if anything, more and more sector specific companies in law, in real estate, in broadcasting are coming to the likes of ourselves and the British Esports Association to ask how they can work with young talent, even engineering companies, believe it or not, understanding this is where cybersecurity might come in well. So I hope that we've been able to provide everyone with a little bit of insight and ideas how broad and how extensive this will be in future.
Guys, you've absolutely done an amazing job. Really, really done it justice. Thank you ever so much, Maria and Andy. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Listen, guys, don't go anywhere. We're just going to play a short video and then go to a short break. But during the break, we will be having a breakout room for everybody who's spoken this morning. So if you want to go and ask them some more questions, whether it's about the topics that they discussed or whether it's about something on a more personal level, you have time to go and do that. The links will be posted in the chat any moment now, but we will be going to a short break. And before I do that, though, I'd just like to pass over to for the video here from Pearson themselves.
Hi, I'm Ollie. I'm a level 3 esports student. I chose to do this course after losing my job through lockdown last year. I wanted to do something which furthers my skill sets in something that I love, which is recreational and competitive gaming. After searching and browsing the internet for different colleges and courses across the UK, I decided on Barnsley College, and I've been there for almost a year now. As a mature student returning to education after 10 years, the advice and support that I've received from tutors has ensured that I achieved the best grades possible. Due to the wide variety in esports, whether it be education or a career, there is something for everyone. For jobs, for example, there are things such as physiotherapy, nutritionists, game development, marketing, and even in the legal side. For me, I'm still deciding which route I want to take. I will be going on to university, but whether it's to study teaching, coaching, event management, or broadcasting, I'm still unsure. Choosing to study esports helps to develop transferable skills which can be applied to everyday life. For example, learning different strategies and tactics also increases problem-solving skills by enabling students to identify and analyse other athletes' play styles and how to counter and overcome them. On top of this, it also increases cognitive skills such as working memory capacity by learning map layouts, team compositions, character skills, and their cooldowns. Other skills aided and improved our attention to detail, teamwork, communication, and sportsmanship. All of these skills can greatly increase success in roles outside of esports. An example of this would be my previous career in IT, where all of these skills are key to progression. For people like myself with a passion in gaming, it makes learning these set of skills more enjoyable and interactive. This is why I would recommend this course to anyone with an interest in gaming and digital entertainment.
All right, guys, thank you very much. We'll be back in about 6 or 7 minutes. So go grab a cup of tea or a drink or a snack, or whatever it is, and we'll see you shortly. Also, feel free to join the breakout rooms. You should be able to join those now. If you need help getting into one that you particularly want to visit, just message me and I'll assign you.